Welcome to Daily Persuasion. I'm Joshua Lisec. Today, we are going to talk about the 80-20 rule and the fact it is fractal. And I'll explain what that means in just a moment, because once you see it once, you'll see it everywhere. It's like if you buy let's say a Subaru Outback. What do you now notice everywhere? Subaru Outbacks. But it's not just you who's buying them. I, of course, am the New York Times bestselling author, co-author, ghostwriter of more than 100 nonfiction books, and a certified hypnotist. Through this unique lens of professional experiences, I teach you how to better influence the VIPs of your life and your career. The 80-20 rule, as you probably have heard, is that 80% of outcomes, 80% of efforts are due to 20% of your results. It's an accurate rule, but it goes like this. Imagine you have 100, let's say, inputs, and you have 100 outputs. You do 100 different things, you get 100 different results. The 80-20 rule goes like this. 80% or 80 of those 100 things that you get out of the things that you did were done or accomplished by 20 of them. Okay? So where would we expect this to show up? Let's take a basketball team. Okay? 80% of the points scored in games would be scored by 20% of your roster, your players, let's say. Something like that you would expect. And then here's where it gets fractal. That means the pattern repeats at larger and smaller scales, or zoom levels, as we might say, those of us who are used to using zoom levels in photos. Of that 20% who scored 80% of the points, 80% of your 20%, the points scored by those individuals were scored by 20%. So you see how it works? So 80% of the points were scored by 20%. And of 80% of the 20%, 20% was of the 20%. You see how that works, right? So you just get smaller and smaller and smaller until you're just down to one person, right? And you would expect this in large organizations as well, even in your organization. 20% of your clients, that's 80% of your revenue. And of that 20%, right? 20% of your 20% are responsible for 80% of that within the 20%, right? It can get a little funky real quick, a little fuzzy. But I want you to notice this pattern everywhere. It is a great way to look for deals. It's a great way to look for trends. It's a great way to look for any number of things. So one of the ways that I have picked up on this pattern is I noticed in maybe 2018, 2019, that was the first time I did a Facebook live stream on this particular subject. I predicted that the laws around polygamy and polyamory and polygyny and whatnot in the United States, I predicted in 2018 that they will be struck down and that they will be made legal. I call it late stage marriage equality, where it's like 4 guys are in a marriage, okay? Or it's a man and his 2 co-wives, and they're both bi, let's say. That would be called a throuple, right? Those are going to be legal federally between 2035 and 2040. Probably on average, I'd guess 2037, 2038. How do I know that this is going to be the case? Well, because when I look out at this is at the time, 2018, 2019, I noticed on my Instagram feed, this is where it gets interesting. About 80% of all of the viral relationship content and clips that I was getting pushed right around 2018, 80% of it was from 20% of, like, let's say, creators. And I noticed that minority were in some sort of open/closed relationship. I'm not exactly sure what you call it, polycule, maybe. It's like there's all this attention, lots of attention, 80% of results, like, let's say, that surrounds this few. Oh, interesting. So what's going to happen? More open-minded couples are going to become influencers, because that's where the economy is going post-COVID. They're going to notice that fewer creators are getting more outsized results by talking about their co-wife, okay, or their mutual boyfriend. Okay. I noticed that then. Other people are noticing it then and now. And so it's going to become a social media spectacle at first. And because laws are always the last to change, it's going to be about 5 to 10 years of normalizing this until everybody knows somebody who's like really active on social media and sort of considers themselves like a personal brand or an influencer, or at least like the popular kids. You know, these couple have been married for, they've been married for 14 years and they've got, the husband's got a side chick, but the wife kind of likes girls a little bit. And now it's their co-wife and they're in a throuple. Okay. And it's a closed triad, you might call it. This is the future, most likely. Now, if you can look at your own space, let's talk about my profession, ghostwriting. I noticed a long time ago that roughly 80% of best-selling books were written by 20% of all ghostwriters. Okay? And even within that, of the 20%, 20% of the 20%, we're doing 80% of those. Okay? And then it comes on down to one guy who writes all the books. And that's me. That sort of distribution, that fractal distribution, expect to see everywhere in your profession. Now, is it always 80-20? No, it's not. Sometimes it's 90-10, or it's 5-95, or it's 30-70, or it's 40-60. But the point is, there's never exactly just one thing that does everything most of the time. This is another helpful way of thinking about things. Everyone likes to wonder, why did Hillary lose? Why did Trump win? And they always pick one thing, right? The Democrats said Russia. That was the one reason. That was the one input that caused 99% of outputs. It doesn't work that way. No. Trump supporters would like to say, well, it's because Kamala was a communist. Now, I would like to think that. I'd like to think that I had an impact on people's perceptions, persuasion, so on and so forth, principles during the election, as you know, my own story. But it's never just 1 in 99. Usually, very, very rarely where you see something like that. It's more like 80-20, right? 20% of all factors that we could consider had 80% of the impact. Life is just complex. But you can figure out what the 20% are, man, you're going to have power. You're going to have power. People in 2038 have been looking at my Facebook Live from 2018 and going to be like, how did this guy know this? He predicted it down to the year it was going to happen. How did he know? Well, 80-20 principle, 80-20 rule. This is what I recommend that you be doing in your own world, is predicting things well in advance. But the 80-20 thing can help you figure it out. Wait a second. 20% of married couples are getting 80% of the viral hits. Oh, what are the 20%? Some sort of an open relationship type thing. That's where the future is. And where the future goes, eventually the legal system follows. That's why abortion was legalized nationwide in 1973, because abortion had already been a widespread, culturally practiced, semi-socially accepted, but quietly amongst women only, and again, and with some playboy men, for about 15 years by that point, approximately. I bet you didn't know that. And now you do. And that's Daily Persuasion.